Good morning, good morning. All right, prophecy, key to the future. We're now through all the bad stuff, now to the good stuff about the millennium and the 7,000 year of reign. This is chapter 12, Growth and Development in Zion and Palestine after the era of universal conflict. All right, so last time we talked about Adam-ondi-Ahman, which again I thought would be a really, really cool place to be when the right time is there. So hopefully, but it has been seen that during the ministration of the 144,000 high priests, the world is expected to witness a great outpouring of plagues, conflict, and devastation. Included among the plagues will be a terrible war, which will bring desolation to the European continent. The overall length of these judgments is not known. Pardon me. However, the scriptures and comments by general authorities of the church indicate certain conditions and events will apparently take place in a more peaceful atmosphere following the universal conflict, and yet before Christ appears on the Mount of Olives during the Battle of Armageddon. In this chapter, it'll be seen that this intermediate era will be a time of growth and development for both the New Jerusalem and for the land of Palestine. This was made in the 1960s, which was common. Literally, that's what it was kind of called, the Palestine area. But to me, it would be the land of Israel, but okay. I'll just read as the book has it, though. Growth of Zion in America. It is anticipated that the city of New Jerusalem on the American continent will experience a great increase in both population and importance as the world recognizes its progress and stability. Orson Pratt indicated that after the other nations have been broken up, many will gladly accept the cause and rule of Zion. Quote, "When that day comes that the Lord shall cut off such people, when the day comes that he will fulfill the revelations of Isaiah, as well as many other revelations that have been given, Zion will have to go forth in her strength and power, and the inhabitants of the nations that are afar off will say, Surely Zion is the city of our God, for the Lord is there, and his glory is there, and the power and the might of his terror is there. Terror to the wicked, terror to those who commit sin. And many people will say, Come, let us be subject to her laws, that will be after the Lord has broken up the nations, after he has destroyed and wasted them away, so far as the wicked portions are concerned. Those who are left will gladly acknowledge Zion, will acknowledge God and his people, and will acknowledge the laws that will be literally sent forth from Zion to the nations of the earth." Journal of Discourses. It appears that as these people come to the New Jerusalem, that city and the surrounding area will experience great growth, and Zion will undergo a period of great expansion. Elder Pratt stated that many of the desolate cities in the nation will be repopulated, and Zion will begin to expand until it will cover the 2 American continents. Then, quote, "Then will be fulfilled another saying of this same chapter which I have read, for thou shalt break forth on thy right hand and on thy left, and thy seed shall inherit the Gentiles, and make the desolate cities to be inhabited." Now, there are a great many cities in the United States that will not be totally destroyed when the inhabitants are swept off the surface of the earth. Their houses, their desolate cities, will still remain unoccupied until Zion in her glory and strength shall enlarge the place of her tents and stretch forth the curtains of her habitations. That is the destiny of this nation and the destiny of the Latter-day Saints. Journal of Discourses 24. The proclamation issued by the Quorum of the 12 shortly after the prophet's death made the following reference to the expansion of Zion in both the American continents and the unity which will then exist between their peoples. Quote, "The city of Zion, with its sanctuary and priesthood, and the glorious fullness of the gospel, will constitute a standard which will put an end to jarring creeds and political wranglings by uniting the republics, states, provinces, territories, nations, tribes, kindreds, tongues, people, and sects of North and South America in one great and common bond of brotherhood, while truth and knowledge shall make them free, and love cement their union. That's a proclamation of the 12 Apostles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Millennial Star, October 22nd, 1845. This proclamation was apparently based on the teachings of the prophet, for the following is recorded concerning his instruction by Elder Benjamin F. Johnson. So this is, I think, a quote from Joseph Smith, how they're putting it. Quote, "He taught us that the saints would fill the great West, through Mexico and Central and South America. We would do a great work for the redemption of the remnant of Jacob, and he taught us relating to the kingdom of God as it would become organized upon the earth through all nations learning war no more, and all adopting the God-given Constitution of the United States as a palladium of liberty." I've never heard of palladium being used in that word, in that way. Palladium, maybe it's emphasized differently, but to me, palladium is an element. But a palladium of liberty and of equal rights, 4. That's an interesting letter unpublished by Benjamin F. Johnson to George S. Gibbs, Brigham Young University Library. Oh, okay. So this is his instruction by Benjamin F. Johnson. So it was not Joseph Smith. The period following the universal conflict is thus regarded by Latter-day Saints as an epoch when the influence of the gospel will be greatly extended, and when the political dominion of the kingdom of God will expand, because of the recognition which it will receive as a source of stability, strength, and righteous rule. It will be shown hereafter that this work will reach its ultimate fulfillment in the millennium. This is interesting to me for a couple of reasons, because I sit here and I think, if this is after a great time of universal conflict, then those who are left who are not already a part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or at least on the same page as laws, rules, and authority of the Church, you are accepting principles according to truth and light. And if you're accepting principles according to truth and light, the question then becomes, all right, for the gospel to continue to spread like this, without contention, that's the big thing, is without people rejecting it, without these creeds, without nations, without borders, etc., there has to be a restructuring of the way of how do you figure things out with people. It really is that the wicked really kind of need to be swept off the face of the land. So, was that done? Or have people been so, for those who are still left, those who are so beat down that they will gladly receive the light and truth of the gospel, because they are not numbered among the dead who are wicked and swept off, but they also realize that there has to be a better way, and this is it. That's a tough one, because part of the purpose of the U.S. Constitution is to protect its border from other people. It's a beautiful republic, and it is one that is, in its purity of its original founding, was meant to help govern a people who were founded in the ideals of righteousness. They weren't perfect, but at least they were striving toward it. I don't know. I think there's going to be a better structure than just the United States Constitution. What would that be? Something very close to it. I would think there'd need to be a few adjustments. But it's always a delicate thing whenever you make an adjustment to the Constitution, because it's the rule of unintended consequences. What are you incentivizing by making this rule change? If you were someone who was, and someone who wanted to desperately take advantage of the system to get your own way, and to rules lawyer your way through it, to foist it in your own position, that's what you got to think about. For example, I was told a political example of something like this. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was getting pretty tired of how the ex-Mormons who become anti-Mormons, deciding to like record their disciplinary councils as they're being excommunicated, and them selectively editing it and throwing it out onto the internet and making it, we became a one-sided punching bag when they did things like that. The church was kind of tired of it, and they thought that it would be best to institute a law similar to California where, nobody can record each other unless both people give consent. This is a bad idea. This is a really stupid and bad idea. And the reason why is because this means that it's illegal for citizen journalists to go out there and find corruption and expose it on their own. It also means that people who are living in an abusive situation can't record the abuse so that they can bring that to court, etc. There's just a lot of bad things that come from it. So in the narrow view of the church being a one-sided punching bag for people who just decide that, when we try and sit there and say, hey, you realize that you're literally teaching against the prophets and doctrines, and you can't remain a member of the church if you continue to do things like that. And that's what we're here to discuss, is are you willing to do that? We'd love to have you back in, but no, if you're not, that's the only choice we're going to have. And then they get to edit it or celebrate it online and whatever else. So when I sit here and think about I've come to realize that the American Revolution was unique among almost any other revolution ever done in history. And that's, each revolution has its own uniqueness, that is true. But to me, I consider it very unique in a very different way. That revolutions bring death, not just through the fighting, but they bring death through the destruction of food supply. And then they bring death and hatred, usually for generations afterwards, for anyone who was on the other side. And then you have war and atrocities as well. But the United States and its revolution, I find unique because, to me, it seems like there was less of that. I can't say it's non-existent, because most history at that time, especially around war and such, were focusing on the fights, the battles, and the fact that afterwards you had your nation. How many people were extremely mad at, I think they were called Tories, and persecuting them or things like that. I'm sure there was hurt feelings and jealousies, sure. But remember, these revolutions are often caused by a very loud and very strong minority with the tacit support of the populace, meaning that the majority of people who just want to get by are like, yeah, I kind of support them, but I got to take care of my farm. I got to take care of my kids. I got to take care of this. You guys want to fight? Go ahead and fight. I'll support you where I can, but, and they mostly stay out of it. So most of the time when I've studied the other revolutions, which I'm not a huge history buff, but between the French Revolution, which I know at least some things about, and between the revolutions that were carried on by Simon Bolivar here in Central and South America, they're awful things. And the people who start them normally do terrible things. Simon Bolivar, for example, he loved the American Revolution, was inspiring, and it inspired all these other revolutions. It was the first among its kind, and it worked. And Simon Bolivar, it took him about 5 tries, if I remember right, to three to five, God, it's been a long time, to finally get the revolution to work. And this is where he goes through and he's trying to kick out Spanish rule, and he's aristocratic and etc. But the problem is that he loves the American Revolution, but he doesn't want to be like America. He feels autocracy, or him at the head, is really the way to go. And by the time he finally actually gets that and kind of crowns himself an emperor or something along those lines, there's a culture where he would go there and he'd set things up and he'd be grandiose, and people would be all on board. As soon as he left, they'd go back to the way that they were living. And so nothing really kept. And then his people underneath him kept trying to depose him, and then it eventually broke up into things like Venezuela, Colombia, Bolivia, etc. after his death or after his exile. And so you can see that how the leaders act and what is given is extremely good and very unique about what happens after. And when you have George Washington, who was a general who decided, nope, I'm not doing this, after he fought. But then his countrymen call on him and he says, okay, fine, let's work on this. You have the Articles of Confederacy, and that fails pretty quick. They get it all redone. Then they get the Constitution of the United States, and he's president. They want him in for life. And he's like, twice, guys. I'm doing this twice, and I'm walking away. I want to be on my farm. The only other person in history who's done that was basically given all the power in the world that he could want, but put it down, was Cincinnatus of Rome, the very first Caesar, the one where they're like, hey, we're in a desperate situation, all power to you. And he, took up arms, defended Rome, and then put it down and walked away back to his farm. It was Cincinnatus and George Washington. And then the rest of the presidents just decided to follow suit with the 2 terms, most of them. But anyway, but the reason I bring all that up is because when I sit here and think about, this is a time where you have a huge amount of conflict. Everyone is against everyone, unless you're willing to be a part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or at least live according to the principles that we espouse. And so, who is left to expand the gospel to? Are those people just beat down and they'll accept it? This will be building a kingdom without borders, which is, again, another really hard thing to do, because normally there's other people out there that sit there and say, nah, I don't want to be a part of you guys. They'll go out and live on their own. So how do you deal with people like that? Or what happens when you have people interior to your kingdom, realm, state, or nation that do not want to live the same way you do, or break the rules? So it's not as easy as it sounds. Building a kingdom or a nation, unless literally everyone is on the same page, means that you have to carve out what happens if. And it becomes a mess, because then it becomes, all right, if we have to deal with people this way, what are the incentives? Will this continue to happen? How do you help them? How do you bring them back into society? Which, again, that's another thing. The idea of having perpetual prisoners and release of prisoners was not common in history. People who went to prison either stayed there till they died, or they became slaves, frankly. I mean, look at Ben-Hur. Good old Ben-Hur. That's it. Or think of Les Miserables. They become hard laborers, either worked to death or perpetually in prison, and basically becoming slaves, or they got killed. You just did not want to be in the prison system at all because of such things. And what do you do with prisoners of war? Again, the modern idea of treating people humanely, helping them return to their country afterwards, not a thing in most of history. So Look at the Jaredites. It's just, there's a lot of really tough questions to consider. And so I would hope it's made easy by everyone wanting to be on the same page morally. But there is your injection of, think about the future. If this is really happening, how is it going to go forward? Because to me, I'm sitting here going, all right, we're going to get through this one way or another. It's going to be rough and tumble, etc. But if we're going to be a part of this, or maybe the generations after us are a part of this, how are they going to handle it? What are the choices they're going to make? That's what I'm thinking about. All right, David, the prince. Joseph Smith spoke on one occasion of David, the ancient leader of Israel, and indicated that he lost part of his glory because of transgression. The prophet then explained, as to his eternal priesthood, that the throne and kingdom of David is to be taken from him and given to another by the name of David in the last days, raised up out of his lineage. History of the Church, and also see Doctrine and Covenants 132, 38 through 39. Really? This I did not know about. So I'm going to look up the Doctrine and Covenants one because I don't have History of the Church here. I will just accept the quotes from History of the Church. Oh, dearie. It's a windy day out and my internet is not working, so I have to use cell stuff. All right, new one. Doctrine and Covenants. And we are going to section 132. Really, 132? This is the principle of eternal marriage and plural marriage. 38 and 39. Okay. So David also received many wives and concubines, and also Solomon and Moses, my servants, as also many of my servants from the beginning of creation until this time. And in nothing did they sin, save in those things which they received not of me. David's wives and concubines were given unto him of me by the hand of Nathan my servant, and others of the prophets who had keys of this power. And in none of these things did he sin against me, save in the case of Uriah and his wife. And therefore he hath fallen from his exaltation, and received his portion, and he shall not inherit them out of the world, for I gave them to another, saith the Lord. So in context of section 132, this is talking about plurality of wives. It's basically saying, look, there are times where I do allow for plural wives, and the sin is not in having plural wives, it's having... And this is a strong position, actually. Because I know some people come up and are like, oh, I can't be a Latter-day Saint because of this whole polygamy thing. And it's like, okay, if you believe in the Bible, which a lot of times those who are against the Church of Jesus Christ, Latter-day Saints, they are, and they do, and especially if they're Protestant and they think it's infallible, then, okay, does that mean that you do not believe in the Bible then? Because if the prophets gave to David all his wives, literally, the wives, many wives and concubines given to David were given from another man's harem to David by Nathaniel, the prophet. It is in the scriptures, it is condoned, and the only sin that was there was when he went after Uriah, who was already married and was not for him. Or what about when Abraham had many wives? Or all these prophets? Well, it was a different time to, they start dancing and having apologetics, and it makes sense because the consistency is that there are times where that's going to be needed. It's not all the time, and it's much more stable to have a regular one man, one woman marriage. But I do not think that those two scriptures point to this that they're talking about. It points to the idea that, yes, that occurred, and what was given to David was given to another, because I do read that in the Old Testament. We'll get to that later in the year when we get to David, probably about July or August or something, or maybe June, July. But the idea is that David rises to power. He's given the wives and concubines of a former ruler or other people, and then he falls from grace, and then it's given to other people. What's fascinating to me is, for the longest time, at the very end of David's reign, he was an old man, and they talked about having a young woman to help warm his bed, literally. I think it was for two reasons. One, it was kind of a wife thing, but also I think in old age, if you're not eating much and your metabolism isn't allowing you to create a lot of heat, you are cold. And so I think it's both literal and figurative. And at the same time, there are certain symbolic and important things that are shown throughout the scriptures that we no longer identify with at all. One of them is the idea of having the queen marry the new person who's coming in to be king. This is why between Solomon and his brother, there was a fight for that girl. And if you look in the Book of Mormon, it's the same thing. When Ammonihah, I think, if I remember his name right, I always forget it, but it's the most evil guy in the Book of Mormon, he's one of these, it was basically Captain Moroni versus Ammonihah. No, Ammonihah's the city. What is his name? I always forget it. That's my problem, is that there's the really evil guy who basically, is it Moroni? Oh, God, I need to look it up. But the idea is that he through all this cavorting and other things, just, he's one of the king men, so he's against the free men. He was the one he wanted to be put on the throne of the Nephites. When he got kicked out, he goes to the Lamanites, and through deception, he's like, look. These Nephite guys, they're the ones you should be fighting. And they were like, no, they kicked our butts, and we don't want to mess with them. He's like, no, they're really after you. They're evil. They're really evil. And he stirs them up to anger. And half of them don't even want to fight. And they're like, okay, no, peace out. We're out of here. And he's like, look, I only want to be second in command. Let me be second in command of this half of the army who's willing to go against the Nephites. And we'll go and get the other half of the Lamanites. And on the way there, he poisons the commander. So now he's the leader of the half that wants to go after the Nephites. Then he brings down the other commander from that mountain and says, hey, let's just talk together. Look, I'll just be second in command, and you can, I'm messing up the story, but the idea is that I'll be a second in command. I think he was given command of those who wanted to fight. He gets the second half, says, look, we don't have to do this. Let's go back. I'll be second in command. He poisons the guy along the way, so now he's commander of the entire army. On his way back, he gets the king murdered, pins it on some servants, and then because he's the leader of the armies, he marries the queen of the Nephites, and that gives him legitimacy, right? We see that in the Book of Mormon. It's the same thing with David as he dies. Solomon and his brother fighting for the girl who was the main woman of David at the time of his death. So that is a symbol that we just don't associate with because it's not a thing to us. And it hasn't been for quite some time. I don't think any current monarchy functions in that way, but that is a long traditional way of getting legitimacy. Another symbol that we're very removed from is the idea of the dancing princess. We still have some books that talk about this. Like there's a play, I think it's the 12 Dancing Princesses or something like that. We see it in the Bible all the time. Times where daughters or women go before people of power to dance for them, to gain favor, to then either create a political alliance, ask for marriage, ask for something incredible, like Esther before the king of Babylon, or the daughter of, King Herod to kill John the Baptist, or, there's a lot. You start looking for it in the Old Testament since we're studying it this year. But the idea of the using the feminine charm in a presentation of a dance is something that we are far removed from. but yet it is nearly universal in older and ancient cultures. And you can still see the vestiges of it in our stories and our tales and in certain cultural practices. So I'm bringing all this up because it's something to be aware about. And so it was quite a bit of a tangent from section 132 talking about how David's wives were given to another. I do not think it specifically says that the throne and kingdom of David is taken from him and given to another by the name of David in the last days, raised up out of his lineage. That quote in this book is specifically History of the Church 6:253. So, because I understand how Doctrine and Covenants 132 is kind of being used to support it, but it is not the same. I don't think it supports it well enough. But let me continue with what it's reading on here. It appears that during the period immediately preceding the Battle of Armageddon, this new leader for Israel will emerge. Like his ancient predecessor, he will rule as a prince, and his name will be David. Jeremiah said that the Lord will raise up a David as king of Israel in the time when the people shall serve the Lord their God. Jeremiah 39. Okay. Zechariah refers to him as the branch, in all capital letters. And while comparing him with the priest named Joshua, who was living at the time, told of the great responsibility David would have in Palestine in the last days, the prophet said that he shall build the temple of the Lord, and he shall bear the glory, and shall sit and rule upon his throne, and he shall be a priest upon his throne. That's Zechariah 6:11-13, and then also see Zechariah 3:8-9, Jeremiah 23:5-6, and Hosea 3:4-5. Okay. I don't remember specifics about that. I'll have to read them this year, but I suspect there's probably other interpretations of those. Also, it will be fascinating if his name is literally David. The reason why is, you know how people can assume a new or different name, or spiritually. For example, like when a new pope comes on, they change their name from what it was to a chosen name. Like the newest one is like Pope Leo XIII or something. And it was not that. His name was quite different from that before he assumed the title Pope. And so if there's going to be a prince-like ruler in Jerusalem, that in the land of Jerusalem, he might assume the name David, or he might be called by the people or by circumstance that he is like King David. So there's different ways to fulfill that in specificity. Ezekiel said that the Lord will set up one shepherd over them, Israel, and he shall feed them, even the Lord's servant David. He shall feed them, and he shall be their shepherd. That is Ezekiel 34:23-24. Okay, I find that interesting. I guess I'll just have to leave that as is, because I've not heard of that, and I'm fascinated by it. Wow, there is a bunch here. Okay, no, we got time. I'm considering all the different stuff here. Many of the Old Testament prophets speak of David who will be raised up in this future period. Isaiah taught that he will be a witness to the people, a leader and a commander to the people, and said that he shall call a nation that he does not know, and nations that he does not know will run unto him, because the Lord will glorify him. Isaiah 55:3-5. I'm just going to have to read these in context. This is new to me. I'm struggling with it. It seems quite possible that Isaiah's prophecy can be interpreted by another portion of his teachings. Chapter 11 of Isaiah tells of the important person who is called both a rod and a branch. And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest on him, and the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, and the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And shall make him of quick understanding in the fear of the Lord. And he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither reprove after the hearing of his ears. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. The righteous shall be a girdle of his loins, and faithfulness the girdle of his reins. It's Isaiah 11, 1 through 5. Sections 113 of Doctrine and Covenants says that this individual is, quote, a servant of the hand of Christ, who is partly a descendant of Jesse as well as Ephraim, or of the house of Joseph, on whom there is laid much power. Doctrine and Covenants 113, 4. Okay, again, I'm just finding, how could I miss so much of this, is what's going through my mind. 113, 4. Who is, okay, so this is a question and answer section of Doctrine and Covenants. Answers certain questions of the writing by Isaiah given by Joseph Smith near Far West in 1838. Who is the stem of Jesse? Spoken of in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th verse of the 11th chapter of Isaiah. Verily, thus saith the Lord, it is Christ. So here they're quoting so they are taking this verse, which I've always thought of Jesus Christ. It is Jesus Christ. And then Joseph Smith says this is Jesus Christ. What is the rod spoken of the first verse of the 11th chapter of Isaiah that should come in the 7th chapter? It is the Lord. Oh, behold, thus saith the Lord. It is, okay, this might be it. What is the rod spoken of in the first verse of the 11th chapter of Isaiah that should come of the stem of Jesse? So the stem of Jesse is Christ. The rod, behold, thus saith the Lord, it is a servant in the hands of Christ, who is partly a descendant of Jesse, as well as of Ephraim, or of the house of Joseph, on whom there is laid much power. Okay. Fair. After telling of the righteous judgment and power which this individual will hold, Isaiah then describes the peaceful atmosphere which will prevail during the millennium. This is Isaiah 11, 6 through 9. Then speaking of that period, quote, and in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, which shall stand for an ensign of the people. To it shall all Gentiles seek, and his rest shall be glorious. It's Isaiah 10. So let me go back to this chapter in Doctrine and Covenants and see if there's something about it. Yeah. Verse 5. What is the root of Jesse spoken of in the 10th chapter? Behold, thus saith the Lord, it is a descendant of Jesse as well as of Joseph, unto whom rightly belongs the priesthood and the keys of the kingdom of the ensign of the gathering of my people in the last days. Okay. And that's what the book quotes. Okay, all right. They're establishing themselves. I'm getting this. Thus it appears that the individual referred to by Isaiah as the rod, branch, and root will have certain characteristics. One, he will live during a period, apparently just before the beginning of the millennium, when he can both judge the poor with righteousness and yet cause the wicked to be slain. Isaiah 11, 1 through 5. He will live into the millennium. Isaiah 11, 6 through 10. 3. He will stand as an ensign of the people. Isaiah 11, 10. And to him will the Gentiles seek. This could be as the Gentiles covet the wealth of Palestine and cause the battle of Armageddon. 4. He will be an important and powerful servant in the hands of Christ. Doctrine and Covenants 113, 4. And 5. He will be a descendant of both Judah, through Jesse, and Joseph, through Ephraim. Doctrine and Covenants 113, 4, and 6. It is significant to note that this prophecy, Isaiah 11, was quoted by the angel Moroni to Joseph Smith when that heavenly being made his first appearance to the prophet. Moroni said that the prophecy was about to be fulfilled. Interesting. Ezekiel also held that Prince David is to play an important part in Israel's worship in the last days, quote, and it shall be the prince's part to give burnt offerings and meat offerings and drink offerings in the feasts and in the new moons and the Sabbaths and the solemnities of the house of Israel. He shall prepare the sin offering, the meat offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offerings to make reconciliation for the house of Israel. That's Ezekiel 45:17 and also 46:2 and verse 12 of 46. The same Hebrew seer taught that David will be the prophet who will be privileged to approach the Lord when he comes to the temple in Jerusalem. And a special door in that temple will be reserved for his use when the Lord is there. Ezekiel 44, 1 through 3. Ezekiel further states that 2 tracts of ground, one on the east and one on the west out of the city limits of Jerusalem, will be given by the people unto the prince as an inheritance, and they will also give him an oblation of a portion of their crops and herds. Ezekiel 45, 7 and verses 13 through 16. It appears then that the David of the last days will hold both religious and political control over Palestine in the period just before the beginning of the millennium and during the early days of that era. He will oversee the gathering of Israel and the construction of the Jerusalem temple, and will receive the Savior at the time of his coming to Palestine. Next will be the removal of the 10 tribes from Zion to Palestine. Okay, I am fascinated by this. The reason I'm very fascinated by this is just, yeah, that's kind of a bigger chapter, so I will have to stop here. I'm deeply, deeply fascinated by this because I had missed this completely. I had no clue, zero, that this prophet David would be such a force in the last days and be so important in many regards for many reasons. I find it amazing because I don't know what was my concept beforehand and why to juxtapose it. Beforehand, I just thought that Jerusalem in Israel would be built up and that we would have people worshiping there, building up kind of a temple complex, doing the Law of Moses type sacrifices. So, a little bit I kind of thought, well, that'd be kind of like an Aaronic priesthood temple complex. Well, whereas over in Missouri and New Jerusalem would be our regular temple complex, but I don't know. It'll be interesting. I've heard people talk about how we would be doing sacrifices and such in New Jerusalem, but I don't know. There's a lot about this that I just never thought about before. Mainly because to me it was just like, yeah, there's going to be New Jerusalem over here. As a kid, I never thought about it at all. I'd hear it kicked around in the church a bunch, and I'd be like, yeah, sure, and pay it no mind. And then a couple of years ago, I started realizing that, whoa, time out. This is important. It's not just something. What got me on it was actually, I was listening to Word Radio, and they were talking about the Heartland model of the Book of Mormon. And at first I was just like, what is this? I always thought of the Book of Mormon being in South and Central America. And then they spoke about a few things that really made me go sit up in my seat and pay attention. Part of it had to do with a little bit of DNA evidence, but other things struck me about the placement and prophecies, because I always knew, like, even further back when we had read the Book of Mormon, that I was like, the prophecies they talk about are very much in line with talking about the area of the United States, about how we won't have any kings, and it will be a land of freedom and other things like that. And so it was always like, oh yeah, this has to do with the American continent, sure, but this also has to do with kind of the United States for several reasons. That meant that, I never realized how thinking about the Book of Mormon being in South Central America, yet having these prophecies in the Book of Mormon that really speak clearly to it being talking about the United States, how I never put that together. And when finally I had to juxtapose them together, and someone else is saying, hey, wait, the Book of Mormon could be easily here in the heartland of America. Here's why and how. And it just hit me. I'm like, whoa, this could very well be really true. And then it also hit me that means that the whole idea of New Jerusalem being in Jackson County wasn't some fantastical idea, but is really an important point. And then talking about Adam-ondi-Ahman, it just, all these things started clicking spiritually. And I'm like, this makes a lot more sense with these kind of arrangements. So I'll still have the two working models of the Book of Mormon being either in Central and South America, but also, like I say, I lean towards the Heartland model because there's a lot of things about the prophecies that are in the Book of Mormon and Doctrine and Covenants that just lean towards that. And maybe it's a lot bigger than I think, that like Hugh Nibley, that maybe it extends from South Central America up into North America. And it really is a much larger area than we assume. This is one of those things where it's like, we'll find out eventually. But it made me sit up and pay attention to the idea of, because someone spoke really well and articulated extremely good points about the Heartland model, that then spiritually kicked off my mind and gone, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. It made me take seriously then everything about Missouri and New Jerusalem. And then it made me want to learn more. And then I started realizing this is important. And that's why I also went to visit Adam-ondi-Ahman. And I started realizing, wait a minute, this is really, really important. Then there comes Jonah Barnes' book about Key to the Keystone, as well as Lost Gems of Genesis, that kick off the idea of, this is the place where Adam dwelt after being in the Garden of Eden. Now, some people like to make fun of us saying, oh, so you think the Garden of Eden was in Missouri? And it's like, well, you believe that the Garden of Eden is over in a desert of Mesopotamia? Come on, dude. It's just as valid as yours. The only difference is that Jonah Barnes points out that the Apocrypha says that where Noah landed was very far from the land where he started. And so if the land where he started was over where Adam had dwelt after the Garden of Eden, then this is a very different place. So as the way he put it is that through the Apocrypha, we know that where the Garden of Eden and where Adam dwelt after the Garden of Eden was very different from where the land of the Middle East is, where Noah landed and then spread from there. And it's really, really cool in that way. Ultimately, so all this stuff about New Jerusalem, I've only picked up and started listening to recently. Ultimately, I never thought about the specifics during the millennium. To me, it was, there'll be a city here, there will be a city there. Christ will come and reign from both sides, and Bob's your uncle. It's like, we're good. I had no other interest in any other details about who was ruling, where did they come from, what their names were, what it would be like. I mean, there's speculation bounding around. I paid zero attention to this. So when we're talking about these specifics, this is new to me. This really is new. And this is why I'm like, well, let's think about this, think about that. But the idea that his name is going to be David, he's going to be ruling in Jerusalem, building up the temple, have political and spiritual authority, that'll be interesting. I never knew, never thought about it, and it's like just in one ear, out the other. Okay, we'll get there, but wow, this is a sit up and listen, watch for this kind of stuff. Now, more importantly, spiritually, we should do the same things for whatever is really important in your life. Basically, go out there and take note of what God is trying to tell you, and remember the blessings that He gives you. Do it in whatever way you need, whether it's by journal, by thanking Him, by recounting it to those who are close with you and on the same page spiritually, or in your prayers of gratitude to the Lord. Be thankful for all He gives you. Remember what He's giving you so that His Spirit can be with you. And let His Spirit be with you to guide you. We'll see you.